I can still hear the notification sound, not in my ears, but in my marrow. Not always, not every minute, but in the mornings. Before the stove is going, before the light is fully here, in that gap between sleep and full waking, when my body knows something is expected of it, but does not yet know what, there it is, the sound, one tone, a half-second pulse, the system signaling, you are needed. There is nothing to respond to. There is no system. The nearest cell tower is somewhere near Sludyanka, 100 kilometers from here. My phone is at the bottom of the Suez Canal. I am in a large timber cabin in the eastern Sayan foothills, Irkutsk Oblast. The temperature outside last night was minus 41 degrees Celsius. I know because I have a thermometer nailed to the east wall of the cabin. Old Soviet glass tube thermometer. Red alcohol, not mercury. I checked it this morning before I started the stove. That was my first task. First task, read the thermometer. Second task, start the stove. Third task, firewood. This is the operational sequence. I have it. I function within it. It is not complicated. It does not require 47,000 TEUs moving through 3 continental hubs simultaneously. It does not require routing decisions that affect $2.3 billion in freight value per month. It requires an axe and dry larch wood, and the ability to stack correctly so the air circulates. I can do this. I am doing this. My name is Viktor Volkov. I was the Global Logistics Director for IMEC Consortium for 6 years. Before that, 8 years with DHL Express, Frankfurt Hub. Before that, 9 years with Maersk, Rotterdam and Newark. 23 years total. I am 62 years old. I was born in Irkutsk, a fact that is relevant to why I am here. I will give you the sequence. That is what I can do. Give you the sequence and the data. You can interpret it. I have stopped interpreting. In 2001, I joined Maersk as a senior routing analyst. Within 4 years, I was managing the Rotterdam night operations. 47,000 TEUs per week through that hub alone. A TEU is a 20-foot equivalent unit, standard container, the baseline measure of everything. The job was to keep things moving, not to improve them, not to innovate, to keep the water flowing. Every day something broke. A terminal went down in Singapore. A port strike started in Newark. A vessel was delayed 3 days in the Malacca Strait, and 17 connecting routes had to be recalculated in 6 hours. Every day was a dam breaking somewhere. Every day I patched it. I had a team. Good people. Dmitry Nansen, 44, was my VP of operations at IMEC. Brilliant man. Completely loyal. He had learned everything from me and from the system I had built. He was fast, precise, decisive. He had one limitation. He could only function in crisis mode. The system had trained him that way. I had trained him that way. He needed the dam to be breaking to know what to do. Lena Brown, 51, had been my executive coordinator for 12 years across Maersk and DHL, and then IMEC. She managed my calendar with the precision of a command center. 18 months booked ahead at all times. She knew my routing priorities before I stated them. She knew which calls to take and which to block and which to hold for exactly 17 minutes until I was between decisions. She told me regularly, and she meant it entirely. You always know what to do, Victor. I believed it. That was the problem. In 2003, I was still at Maersk Rotterdam. A junior analyst asked me, fresh from MIT, very bright, very earnest. He asked what the optimization target was for the night shift. I was reading a manifest. I did not look up. I said, efficiency is a lie. He laughed. He thought I was joking. I was not joking. But I also did not explain. I just kept reading the manifest. It was something I had noticed early in my career and filed away. The more you optimized the system, the more brittle it became. Efficiency meant no slack. No slack meant no resilience. The most efficient systems were the first to collapse under stress. But I kept building efficient systems, because that is what the job was. You optimize. You remove slack. You increase throughput. You do it faster, tighter, leaner. And then you stand there holding it together with your hands because the system has no slack left to absorb the failures. That is what I was doing for 23 years. Standing in the water, holding the dam with my hands. In 2019, Maersk gave me the Director of the Year award at a company dinner in Copenhagen. The dinner was at a hotel in the city center, 300 people. The category logistics directors rarely fill a room like that. These are not people who fill rooms. They are people who move things so that other people can fill rooms. They put me at the front. They said things about the Rotterdam to Newark corridor recovery during the container crisis. They said the citation called me the one who holds the dam. They meant it as a compliment. I understood it as a description. People applauded. I received a plaque. I held it. I waited to feel something about that. I waited for several seconds, maybe longer. Nothing routed correctly. The applause was real. The words were specific and accurate. The plaque had weight. None of it found an address. I went back to my hotel room. I had a call with Singapore at 11 p.m. I took the call. In 2021, the global container system came very close to complete operational failure. The pandemic had already disrupted the routing globally. Then the backlogs hit. The Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach had over 100 vessels at anchor simultaneously. Routes were collapsing across 4 continents. IMEC had 14 terminals in 3 continental zones. I was responsible for all of them. My team and I rerouted 12,000 stranded TEUs in 72 hours. This required continuous decision-making for 3 days with approximately 4 hours of sleep total. It worked. The corridor held. Dmitry was on the other end of the line for most of those 72 hours. Lena was coordinating 34 parallel call chains. We kept the water from breaking through. Afterward, I slept for 11 hours. I woke up. Dmitry had already identified the next crisis. We moved to the next crisis. That was the structure. One crisis, then immediately the next. The dam never stopped needing to be held. I did not think this was abnormal. I thought it was the job. Sometime around 2021 or 2022, I began to notice something. Not in operations. Operations were sharp. In other areas. When Lena would ask me something non-operational, "Viktor, did you manage to eat today?" I would process the question and find no immediate routing. A pause. Brief. Maybe 2 seconds. Longer than it used to be. I thought it was fatigue. I routed it under fatigue and kept moving. In 2022, a consultant asked the leadership group what brings them energy. I opened my mouth and produced a sentence about throughput metrics. Accurate, not the question. I filed it under input format incompatible. Moved on. World Economic Forum. Davos. January 2024. I had been on 4 WEF panels in the previous 6 years. Supply chain resilience, global logistics infrastructure, post-pandemic recovery. Topics I could address with precision. Topics with addressable data. This panel was titled Supply Chain Resilience in an Era of Polycrisis. 4 panelists. I was the operational director. There was a professor from ETH Zurich, a chief sustainability officer from a German chemicals company, a former World Bank economist. The moderator was Swiss, an academic, no operational experience in freight. He had good questions for the first 30 minutes. Container ship capacity, Red Sea alternative routing, nearshoring trends in European manufacturing. Then he turned to the panel. He said, "But what makes all this meaningful to you personally?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came. Not stage fright. I have given hundreds of presentations. I do not experience stage fright. This was different. The word meaningful arrived in my head and I searched for its address. I searched for the port, the hub, the routing code. Where does meaningful go? What terminal receives it? There was no terminal. 6 seconds. I counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I stood up. I walked from the panel table to the left exit of the ballroom. I did not say anything. I did not announce anything. I went through the exit, through a service corridor, through a door into the Davos street. It was -3 degrees Celsius outside. I was in my suit jacket. I stood there for approximately 2 minutes. Lena texted me, "Viktor, is everything okay?" I did not reply. Not because I was rude, because I did not know what to put in the field. What was the accurate response? What was the operationally correct answer to, "Is everything okay?" I stood there in the Davos street for 2 minutes and I could not route the question. She had said it for 12 years. "You always know what to do, Viktor." I thought about that phrase standing in the Davos street. She was right. That had always been accurate. For 23 years I had known what to do. In every operational situation, in every crisis, in every routing failure and terminal shutdown and labor dispute and weather delay, there was always a next action, always a correct next move. The system always had a response. In the Davos ballroom, there was no correct next move. The system had encountered a query it could not process. That was when I understood that the system had a gap, not a flaw, just a gap. An entire category of human language, questions about meaning, about feeling, about experience as distinct from operations. That category had no rooting in my head. I had not noticed because I had never stopped moving long enough to need that rooting. I walked to my hotel. I packed my bag. I booked a flight to Cairo. The logistics inspection in Cairo was already scheduled. A terminal audit. Suez Canal Zone. February 2024. I completed the audit. The terminal was performing at 94.7% of projected throughput. Minor adjustments required. I filed the report. The day after the audit, I drove out to the Suez Canal Causeway. There is a crossing point at Ismailia. You can stand on the structure and watch the ships transit. Very close. 50 meters, maybe 60. A vessel was passing. Ultra-large container ship. Approximately 400 meters in length. 14,000 TEUs I estimated from the profile. Moving at 11 knots through the canal. Steady, slow, enormous. I was holding my phone. I checked. 247 unread notifications. The notification sound was pulsing. One tone. Half-second pulse. I looked at the ship. I looked at the phone. The ship did not need my decisions to pass through the canal. The ship was moving. The water was flowing. The 14,000 containers on that vessel would reach their destinations. The routing was already established before the ship left the port of origin. Before I arrived at this causeway, before any of this, I threw the phone into the canal. It hit the water approximately 30 meters from the ship's hull. Made no sound I could hear over the vessel's engine noise. I watched it go. Then I said, out loud, to the passing container ship, because there was no one else on the causeway at that moment, and because it seemed like the correct address for this statement, efficiency is a lie. No irony this time. Different weight. The ship continued passing. It took 3 minutes for the full hull to clear the crossing point. I watched the entire transit. Then I drove back to Cairo airport and booked a flight to Moscow. I need to explain something about the dam. I thought I was the dam. For 23 years I thought, Viktor Volkov is standing between the freight and the chaos. Viktor Volkov is holding the system together. Without Viktor Volkov's decisions, the water breaks through. This is not accurate. I understand this now. I was not the dam. Infrastructure is the dam. Terminals, vessels, routing algorithms, port agreements, customs frameworks, that is the dam. I was a man pressing my hands against the dam. The dam would have held without me, and if the dam had not held, the water would have found another route. Water always finds another route. The Suez Canal is 6,000 years old in some form. Before that, other routes. The Cape of Good Hope. Before that, overland. Before that, other configurations. The water does not stop. It routes around. It finds another path. I was not holding anything. I was pressing my hands against something that did not need to be held by a human body. And in the process of pressing, I had used up the part of my brain that routes non-operational language. That is the accurate description of what happened. I needed to stop being wet. I flew from Cairo to Moscow, took the train from Moscow to Irkutsk. That is 5,179 kilometers. The train takes 72 hours. I sat in the compartment for 72 hours. No phone, no laptop, no work. The Siberian landscape rolled past the window for 3 days. Birch forest, then pine, then the gradual opening into the steppe, then the beginnings of the mountain system, then Irkutsk. I was born in Irkutsk. I left at 7 when my family moved to Moscow. I had not been back in 40 years. My grandmother was from this region. She had some Buryat ancestry. Her mother had been Buryat, her father Russian, and she carried a few words of the language into her Russian as fragments, the way old people carry the edges of things that are disappearing. She had a word, a Buryat word, for a specific quality of winter forest silence. I do not have the word now. I cannot remember it. I can only remember the experience of her using it. When we walked in the forest outside the city when I was 6 or 7, she would stop walking. She would say the word very quietly, and I understood that she was naming something that existed, a quality of the silence that was distinct from silence. Something like the absence of demand. I cannot recover the word. I can only know that the thing it named is here, in the Sayan foothills, in the space between the larch trees when the wind is still, the absence of demand. I hired a man in Irkutsk with a UAZ truck to drive me into the foothills. He did not ask many questions. He was perhaps 60 himself, missing the tip of one finger on his left hand. A saw injury or a frost injury, I did not ask. He drove for 3 hours on unpaved roads. The last 30 kilometers were through forest. He stopped at the cabin. He said, "Here." He waited to see if I would reconsider. I did not reconsider. He drove away. The cabin had been used by a man who studied permafrost. He had been here for 30 years before he left. I do not know his name. He left a shelf of equipment, most of it useless to me. Soil temperature probes, data notebooks, measuring tape, measuring texts in Russian that I do not need. He left the cast iron stove. He left the axe. He left a tin kettle. He left a reindeer fur blanket on the sleeping platform. I bought a reindeer skin coat in Arshan at the market on the Lake Baikal shore. This was December. The coat is large, heavy, smells of smoke and hide. It is warm to minus 45 degrees Celsius. I also packed, and I cannot fully explain this, a Brooks Brothers Oxford shirt, white, size 17 to 34. I had purchased it in Manhattan in 2019, still in its original garment bag, never worn. I packed it when I left for Siberia. I do not know why. It is on the shelf here, in the bag, still white, still in the garment bag. I have not worn it here. I have looked at it several times. I have not decided what to do with it. It is the only object from my previous operational context that survived the transition. The routine here is simple. I will describe it. First light is between 6 and 8 a.m. depending on season. I rise at first light. I read the thermometer on the east wall. Then I start the stove. This takes approximately 12 minutes. The cast iron stove is Soviet era, pre-1970, extremely reliable. It does not have sensors or displays. It has a firebox, a flue, and a damper. That is the entire system. Then I pump water. The hand pump is south of the cabin. The well is 11 meters deep. The water comes up cold enough to hurt the hand. I fill the kettle. I put it on the stove. I wait for it to heat. Then I split firewood. 1 hour, sometimes 2. The larch wood here is dense. It splits cleanly when the temperature is below minus 20 degrees Celsius. The axe is hand-forged, well balanced, left by the previous occupant. I stack the split wood against the east wall. This is where the counting happens. I do not decide to count. It happens. I am stacking and then I notice I am at 37. The count is already in progress. I don't know when it started. I stack to 60 or to 80 or to whatever the session produces, and the count runs alongside the stacking without my initiating it. I notice this about myself. I do not comment on it. The larch trees here do not hold the river. They stand beside it. I noticed this in January on a walk to the frozen river, approximately 800 meters north of the cabin. The river is frozen to a depth I cannot determine. The surface is gray-white. The larch trees grow to the edge of the bank and stop. They do not hold the river. They do not lean over it. They stand upright beside it, and the river does whatever the river does. In spring, the snow will melt. The permafrost layer will conduct the water down the slope. The river will rise. The larch trees will still be standing beside it, doing nothing to stop it, doing nothing to direct it. This is not wisdom. It is just what I saw on a walk. The silence here is not silent. That is a technical inaccuracy. There is wind through the larch branches, a specific dry, high-frequency sound, different from pine or fir, because the larch needles are smaller and the tree loses them in autumn. In winter, the branches are bare and the wind makes a different sound through bare wood than through needles. There is also the stove settling. The logs contract as they burn. The cast iron ticks and pops as temperature changes move through the metal. These are operational sounds, signals of a system functioning. And there is the crack of a frozen tree occasionally in extreme cold. When the temperature drops past -40 degrees Celsius, the water inside the tree cells freezes and expands and the cell walls fail. The sound is like a shot. I heard it 3 times last night. Between these sounds, the absence of demand. I sat with it last night for, I am not certain, 2 hours. 3. The stove burning low. I had not added wood in some time. I was tracking the fire's consumption, the way I used to track throughput on a terminal display, watching the variables, not intervening. The firewood supply near the stove was getting low, maybe 8 pieces left, then 7, then 6. I did not get up. I have been trying to locate something, I am not sure what to call it, a response, an emotional output corresponding to the events of the last 14 months. I should have, somewhere in the processing, something that roots to grief or relief or anger or regret. These are standard outputs for the category of events I have experienced. Career of 23 years ended abruptly. Identity attached to that career dissolved. Return to origin city after 40 years. Isolation in extreme conditions. The correct emotional outputs for this set of inputs. I have not been able to produce them on demand. I am not numb. That is not the accurate word. Numb implies something that should be there is blocked. I am not sure something is blocked. I think the routing was never built. The years of operational priority over everything else. I was not suppressing emotional outputs. I simply did not build the infrastructure to process them. There is no terminal for grief in my operational map. There are terminals for everything logistical, nothing for the other categories. I sit with the stove and I wait to feel something about that. About the 23 years. About Lena Brown asking if I was okay in a Davos street. About my grandmother's word that I cannot remember. The processing continues. Results pending. I want to be accurate. Davos was not a breakdown. My operational functions were fully intact. I left because staying would have produced no useful output. The session had moved to a question I could not process. I exited. That is correct operational behavior. What was incorrect was the underlying condition. 3 years of degradation in the subsystem processing non-technical language. I had not flagged it. I had not submitted it for maintenance. The Davos exit was a diagnostic. The diagnostic returned. Critical infrastructure missing. The infrastructure that is missing, I cannot build it by deciding to build it. That is the current constraint. 5 pieces of firewood. 4. The fire is lower now. The orange light from the stove grate is less. The shadows in the room are more. I am not cold. The cast iron holds the heat for a long time after the fire drops. The room will stay above 0 for several hours after the fire goes out. I am not going to add more wood. I have firewood. There is a stack outside, enough for several days. I could go outside, bring in 6 pieces, have the stove going at full capacity within 20 minutes. I am choosing to watch the fire go down. 3 pieces. The thing about the Brooks Brothers shirt. I keep returning to it. Inventory question. It is a white Oxford cloth button-down shirt, size 17 to 34. Purchased at the Brooks Brothers store on Madison Avenue, Manhattan, October 2019, approximately 6 weeks after the Copenhagen Director of the Year dinner. I had worn out a previous shirt of the same specification. I purchased a replacement, standard item replacement. I put it in a garment bag. I packed the garment bag in December 2024, when I left for Siberia. I did not pack it deliberately. I did not think, I will bring this shirt to remind myself of what I was. I did not think anything about it. I packed it. It was in my bag. I arrived at the cabin. It is on the shelf. I have been here 3 months. The shirt has not been worn. It is still in the garment bag, still white. I look at it sometimes, the same way I look at the thermometer. I read it. It says, -41 degrees. The shirt says, you packed this. That is all it says. It does not say more. I do not know what to do with it. I have not decided. 2 pieces of firewood. The last thing I want to say about the dam. There is a failure mode in operations called normalization of deviance. The system functions correctly so many times with suboptimal procedures that the deviation becomes normal. Nobody flags it. Nobody submits it for maintenance. The gap stays open until the system is under stress, and then the gap is everything. I built indicators for every failure point in every system I managed. Redundancies, check-in protocols, early warning tripwires. I was known for this. I was the man who built the indicators. I did not build an indicator for myself. I was the one running the diagnostic system. It did not occur to me that the diagnostic system could degrade. I was also the system. I was also the gap. One piece of firewood. The fire is very low now. A small orange pulse in the grate. The cast iron is still warm. The room is the room. The silence is coming in. Not as a sound, as a quality, the absence of demand. My grandmother would have had a word for this. She would have said it quietly. I would have known she was naming something real. I do not have the word. I have the thing itself. One piece. The log shifts in the grate. The fire adjusts. Still burning. Just lower. I sit here. I am not frightened. I am not sad. I am not relieved. I am waiting for the processing to complete, but I am no longer certain it will complete. I think this might be the new operational state. Not a transition, not a recovery, just this. The fire, the dark, the absence of demand. The log settles. The last piece of firewood burns down slowly. The orange drops toward red. The red drops toward nothing. The darkness comes into the room the way water finds its level. Gradually, without announcement, I sit in it. The stove ticks once as the metal cools. Then silence. Then the absence of everything except the silence. I am 62 years old. I was born 100 kilometers from here, in a city that is still standing, that I have not visited. I managed 47,000 TEUs per week at my peak operational output. I held the dam with my hands for 23 years. The water found another route. It always does. The fire is out. Efficiency is a lie.